He's the voice of college football for the Mothership and ABC. Brent Musburger back on the show. Brent, how you been?
Been great, Dan. How are you and the gang doing this morning?
We're doing okay. We've had a few college football items to talk about. You got A&M in Missouri coming up this weekend. Let me just start with, I don't know how many years you've done college football, but where do you put Manziel, just the entertainment aspect of him in the category?
In the top echelon, Dan. And you know, you use the right word, entertainment. I don't hear a lot of fellas say that about athletes, but Johnny Manziel is just one of those that you know, he attracts attention. He's great fun to watch, and I love the fact, because you're around the NFL guys over the weekend, and I love the fact that they're discussing, can he possibly do this in the NFL? You know, they wonder if it translates, but you look out to Seattle and you see a fellow of not great stature, Russell Wilson, having a great career. You look down to New Orleans, you see Drew Brees. So I put Manziel right up there with the best of the entertainment players that we've ever seen.
Do you think Manziel can translate into the NFL?
You know, Dan, the more I watch him, I had doubts. We had his first game, by the way. They had a little hurricane disrupt their opening game. I think it was Louisiana Tech last year. So they actually opened at home against Florida. And in the first half, it was the first time that I'd seen him in person, and it was dazzling. And they led, I believe they led the Gators, and then Florida came back in the second half defensively. And I thought, well, he's just a nice college quarterback and doesn't have much of a future in the NFL. But the more you watch him, and for the rest of the time I'm watching him on tape, you say, wait a minute, he's got something a little bit special. So certainly he'll get a good look. I'm not sure he's a first-round draft choice, Dan, but he'll get a strong look from somebody.
You had Baylor and Oklahoma State, and we were looking at Baylor as one of the most decorated offenses in college football history. What did we miss leading up to that game that we didn't factor in with Oklahoma State?
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one, Oklahoma State has some really good athletes, Dan, on the defensive side of the ball. And when you play Baylor, you've got to do that because that spread that Art Briles uses means that you've got to play man-to-man in your secondary. And you've just got to have athletes who can stay with the wide receivers. But number two, what was overlooked most of all, and I'm still shaking my head at it, Oklahoma State is really tough in Stillwater. I think over their last 18 games down there, they've lost only once. It was a bitter cold night. And the other thing that sort of got by everybody is that this Baylor team, pretty beaten up. When you lose your left tackle, your middle linebacker, your best running back, and one of your best receivers, you're really shorthanded. And those fellows didn't play. So that just kind of, you know, it got kind of glossed over. And even those of us building up the game failed to probably mention that as much as we should have. But it's a wonderful story down at Baylor. They're just not as good as Alabama and Florida State and Ohio State right now.
He's Brent Musburger from ESPN and ABC joining us, Dan Patrick Show. But I'm also looking at the profile you have of Oregon and Baylor. Baylor just new to the landscape, but here's Oregon: uniforms, money, Nike, the offense, all of those things. Then they get into one of those slugfest. They can't win a slugfest. So this style of offense, this style of play, can you win championships with this? We're seeing Alabama, be up there again, SEC style of football. But is Baylor, Oregon, is that the wave that you can win a championship, or do you think it's just a great novel approach for an entire season?
I think it's a great novel approach for an entire season, and as long as you've got a coach, Dan, like Nick Saban. And, of course, one of his former offensive coordinators, Jimbo Fisher, is down at Florida State, and they recruit in the same areas. I think once you put together those power teams, I remember Chip Kelly telling us after the loss to Auburn, when Oregon went right down to the final second field goal that beat them. I remember what he said. He said he looked at the defensive linemen, and he said, we don't have people and depth and numbers like they've got down in the Southeastern Conference. So I think that power football, in the end, will still win the most national championships. I would tend to go with that. But the great equalizer is that spread, and Cam Newton ran some of it the year that Auburn Auburn won the championship, but again, they had a very, very good defensive line.
Of all the interviews you've done, have you gotten as much attention from the Eminem interview when he came into the booth there?
It's funny you mentioned that, Dan, because, I'm out here in Montana, and I'm not thinking much about what we did. I'm out running errands, and et cetera, et cetera. And inevitably, somebody during the week will say, hey, what was the Eminem? Or, well, how's your buddy? And I just kind of chuckled because the answer to your question is no, we've never gotten as much attention as we did for that. He looked a little goofy with his eyes when we came on the air, which you had seen, and people have asked me, was he high? And then I said, no, not at all. I said, the fact was they turned the lights out the stadium. The Michigan band, they were performing some kind of a show, and our camera is a fixed position camera up in the booth, and he was having a hard time realizing why his picture looked so good on the monitor right in front of him, and everything was pitch black darkness out in front. He couldn't see the camera, and he was thrown off by it. But no, it was pretty interesting. And when he said to Herbie nothing when he asked him about his new LP, I thought maybe I'll just change this subject here a little bit.
But before the interview, was he conversant, natural?
Yeah, he has a lot of bodyguards around him. He had a ton of security, Dan. And my one son Blake was out there, and he's a big music guy. And he asked if he could get a picture taken, and Eminem couldn't have been more gracious. And the two of them posed for a picture. And from everything I've heard from our cameramen and behind the scenes folks, he was very nice to everybody. And but security got him in, got him out. And then they later showed it up on the big jumbotron, and when he was up at halftime, he got a huge ovation from the Michigan student body. But even now, just like you, it still comes up in conversation with folks.
I love that you said, "All right, Mathers." Like you didn't call him Marshall or Eminem. It's like, "All right, Mathers." You good luck to you in that album of yours.
Exactly.
Give me the rivalry game that you have to go see in person.
It varies a little bit. I wouldn't say Ohio State, Michigan this year, Dan, but I would think that everybody should try to make one of those. I honestly think the most bitter of the rivalries is Alabama and Auburn. I think that one's pretty serious. When Steve Spurrier was needling Bobby Bowden, Florida State, it's a hard thing because, like, this year you figure Ohio State will get up on Michigan and win fairly easily. But they all in their time have been games that people should try to go see at least once. But the one, as I think about it now, Dan, there is one game that always stands out above all the rest that everybody should go to once, and that's Army-Navy. Dick Vermeil and I did that game a lot. The pageantry, the way the kids play, I remember we went 3 quarters without a penalty once in an Army-Navy game, and then Vermeil was just amazed. He'd never seen a couple of football teams that were that disciplined. And, of course, we visited the 2 campuses before the game. So I think I'd have to put that one at the top of the list. You
interviewed presidents?
Yes.
Favorite? I mean, a lot of them are big football fans, but what's the biggest sports fan that you ever interviewed that's president?
Beyond a shadow of a doubt, it was George Bush the elder. He had played baseball at Yale, and he came into the radio booth on that day when the Mets and Houston, and I think it was 16 innings, Johnny Bench and I were doing a radio game. And I just, on a whim, said, Mr. President, would you take over the play-by-play? And he kind of looked at me with big eyes, and he did. He did a couple of outs for us up there, and he was very capable. And so he was by far the best sports fan that I was not around JFK. I'm told that he was a huge football fan and knew a lot about it, but I never had the pleasure of being around him in the booth.
Well, have fun this weekend. Tell Herbie we said hello, and always good to visit with you.
Oh, yes, indeed. You guys do a great job. But over the weekend, I love, when I get off the road back here in Montana, I love watching you guys show me all the highlights or get ready for the Sunday night game with Al and Chris. Great job, Dan.
Thank you, Brent. Good to hear from you again.
Bye.
Thank you, buddy. That's Brent Musburger from the Mothership and ABC.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.